On this Manna Machine Alert, we are going to bring you something very interesting. Potentially the oldest evidence of Christianity found north of the Alps. A tiny silver phylactery. Okay, for those of you who've never had viewed one of our Manna Machine Alerts, we basically bring you news articles, and my producer and I discuss them. And what we're going to do today is talk about this really interesting discovery of a Roman tiny silver phylactery that was found in a grave, essentially the grave of a ancient Roman in Germany. And what's really interesting about this, it's a really small phylactery. It's 1.4 inches long, and it was found in situ in a Roman grave. So it's datable between 230 and 270 AD.
Of note is that it wasn't just an isolated grave. They uncovered an entire Roman graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
So this was one particular grave in this larger graveyard, which also helps the dating.
Yeah. Now, this thing has been published widely. The article we're reading from is from Smithsonian Magazine, but it's also been published in the Jerusalem Post, Live Science. It's sort of made the rounds of the scientific journalism.
Everybody's excited
Everyone's
about it.
excited about this. There's some things that I think we should say about this, because some of what's been said about it has been overstated. I think it's also important that we also compare it to some recent finds. Because when we compare this to recent finds, I think it really puts things into context.
Yes.
It expands what we know now about early Christianity. Okay? So, what they did... Now, this thing is really brittle. It's an exceptionally brittle piece.
And people can see in the picture that the corner of it, one end, has broken off.
Mm-hmm.
So when we show people what it says, parts of it are missing.
Yeah. It's apparently was broken in situ already.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
this was found underneath the skeleton's chin. So apparently it was an amulet that they think was probably worn around his neck, hung by a cord.
Yeah.
So it was a personal item.
Yeah, it's a personal item. I think one of the things about this that's super important is the whole fact that it was found in situ.
Yes.
Now, when this thing was discovered, the first thing people started to do was compare it to the Mount Ebal curse amulet. And I think that's a fair comparison, because they were found in different contexts, they were found in different ways, and the results of the tomographic scans are very different too. I think this is really, really important to stress, and we'll have the tomographic scan here up of this amulet. But one of the things you notice immediately about this amulet is the writing's clear. There's no question whether or not there's writing on it.
Yes. Now, what's also interesting about the writing is it is in Latin, not in Greek, not in Hebrew. Y'all should have seen Dave try and figure out the Greek initially.
Well, I assumed when I first saw the scan, this was Greek, but I couldn't make heads or tails of it.
Almost all these kind of amulets are either in Greek or the original Hebrew.
Yeah.
So it was a logical assumption. So fortunately, the author of this particular article mentioned it's written in Latin. And then the writing made a lot more
sense once I just found out it was in Latin, yes.
But again, that's a problem when you bring your presuppositions.
Yeah.
There are people who would have figured out Greek words to the Latin reading.
Yeah, pareidolia. Pareidolia can even play into when you encounter unfamiliar languages like that. Yeah. And I don't understand Latin, so that's one language I never learned. So, but I think it's really important too that the context of this discovery too, because it was found as part of a wider excavation. It was found in situ, so in the actual grave itself, around the neck of the deceased. Because of that, we have secured dating for this.
Yes.
The Mount Ebal curse amulet was found in a fill pile. Now, a fill pile is when you finish when you do an excavation and you take all the unwanted dirt and you put it in a pile. That's a fill pile.
And the reason they sift through the fill pile is because there can be very interesting little bits hidden among the dirt.
Yeah. In this case, this was not found in a fill pile. This was found in context.
Yes.
So we know from other discoveries made in this cemetery when this should date. Date to between 230 and 270 AD. And the person who owned the amulet seems to have been a man in his 30s or 40s. So that's one difference, is because we know the context of the find and it was found in situ instead of in a fill pile. There's no debate about the context of this find and the dating of this find.
Now, one of the things that is mentioned is while Christianity was practiced at the time, it was not widely acceptable to practice Christianity.
Yes.
So this man was showing a certain brand of courage in practicing his Christianity.
Yeah.
So that does extend the boundaries of how far Christianity was practiced.
Yeah. Now, we should probably talk about the actual inscription itself, because that too is very interesting. It reads, in the name of St. Titus, and in the name of his cutoff, it's presumed to be in the name of St. Titus. Holy, 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 in the name of Jesus Christ, Son of God, the Lord of the world, resists to the best, and broken off, all seizures, broken off. God grants well-being, admission. The rescue device protects the person who surrenders to the will of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Since before Jesus Christ, bend all knees, the heavenly ones, the earthly, and the subterranean. Every tongue confess to Jesus Christ. End quote. Okay, so that's the inscription on it. It's a really beefy inscription. It's got a lot of detail here that points to early Christian doctrine.
And the article does say it's one of the earliest extant writings in Christian writings of the term holy, holy, holy.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that too is a quote from the Old Testament, but
yes,
it's one of the earliest extant in Christian writing. There's some features of this amulet text that I think is really interesting. Now, one of the points of comparison that I think is that really important is that Jesus Christ, Son of God, there's this identification here of Jesus as God in the text. Now, some commentators have suggested that this is proof that Jesus was divine. Not proof that he was divine, it's proof that people believed he was divine.
And that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
It's important when you're making public statements about these type of things that one doesn't overstate what's actually there.
Yeah, exactly.
One doesn't want somebody else to come along and say, oh, well, this isn't evidence that Christ was Lord. It is, however, as David said, evidence that people believed that in the farthest reaches of the Roman Empire at a very early date.
Now, scholars have for a long time argued that early Christianity did not believe that Jesus Christ was divine. They basically say that this was an later accretion that happened at Nicaea. Now, this amulet is about 100 years before Nicaea.
Proof positive.
So,
sorry, people who want to believe that.
But what I found so interesting about this, that dating, that 230 to 270 dating, really interesting.
As it ties in with another find that dates to that period.
Exactly. Which was the Megiddo mosaic. Now,
I would have loved to have seen this one live.
well, apparently it's on display now. So
we're going to head down to
So
Washington,
now you can go to a prison in northern Israel and see a Christian mosaic.
I thought they moved it to the.
Did they move it?
Yeah, they moved it to the Washington Museum.
Oh, did they? I didn't see that, but but it was found in a prison. But this mosaic, it has been presented as the earliest to date evidence that Jesus was considered to be God. And the mosaic reads, quote, "The God-loving Akeptos has offered the table to God, Jesus Christ, as a memorial." And this was, it wasn't really a recent find, but it's one that's come into the press more recently. But what's interesting now is we've got two texts that tie Jesus to being God. Got this mosaic now, and we now have this phylactery amulet. Now, what we have now then is basically a evidence of propinquity. Now, for those of you who don't know what propinquity is, it's when you have two things that are close in time or space. Now, this is not close in geography. These are two...
Israel to Germany.
Yeah, it's Israel to Germany. It's very far apart. But what we have here is temporal propinquity. Same time as people in Megiddo in Israel are believing Jesus is God. We've got this Roman in Germany at the same time believing Jesus is God.
So it was common in the Christian church at that time.
Yeah. Now, if you've read any of the church fathers, they're all over the Roman Empire. But the argument for scholarship is, well, you can't trust the church fathers because they may have been edited by the later church. Okay? But this gives really good evidence to show that the church fathers are in sync with the other archaeology of that time. So when it talks about Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyon, that's in France. So, we got all of these things happening all simultaneously. You've got this noble woman in Israel who's making an offering table to her god. You've got this Roman in Germany who's wearing this amulet of protection, who also thinks Jesus is God. And then you have now the testimony of the church fathers on top of that, who are spread out all over the Roman Empire, writing about Jesus as God.
And again, that raises the issue most people will bring up as church historians, that this was God's planning to bring Jesus Christ into the world at the time of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Because
the Roman Empire built roads that reached most of the known world at the time.
Mm-hmm. This shows that the belief, this core doctrine of Jesus as God, is very early in the Christian church. It's not late.
Not a later addition.
Not a later addition. And I think that is really, really important. Now that we have, this is what we have, this is what we call corroborating evidence. When you got two finds that corroborate each other. And that kind of evidence is very powerful.
Yes.
It's very powerful because it sort of narrows the window of skepticism. Again, we're not claiming that this proves that Jesus is God. We're claiming that this proves that early Christians believed Jesus is God. So that narrows down that whole window of, oh, well, this was all made up in Nicaea. It's like, that's not going to happen anymore. There's also one other feature of this amulet that I think was very interesting. Well, there's actually several other features of this text that I think is. The first thing I thought was really interesting was the bend all knees. I thought that was really interesting. Heavenly ones, earthly, and subterranean.
Don't hear that much in church anymore.
No, you don't. You'll hear every
Probably
knee.
because it gives us nightmares.
Yeah. Every knee shall bow in heaven and earth. But this text of subterranean, very interesting, that the belief that there are entities beneath the earth. This idea of Sheol or Hades.
Yes.
So this is reflected upon the idea of also not just that there are heavenly beings that are bound and bending the knee, and those on earth that will bend the knee. Also, the unrepentant, the demonic, they too will bend the knee, Jesus Christ. So, and every tongue will confess Jesus is Lord.
Some will just benefit from it, and some will be grumpy about it.
Yeah. But I think this is really, really interesting.
It is a very powerful statement.
It's a very powerful statement, and it asks for of course physical protection. It asks for protection against the principalities. It's a really interesting. It's not all that formulaic. I mean, it has elements of formula in it, like in the name of Jesus Christ, Son of God, in the name of Saint Titus. So there is that sort of formulation.
And in the name of Titus also reinforces the idea that saints, veneration, not saint worship, but venerating the saints.
Yeah, veneration of the
was
saints.
a very early practice of the early church.
I agree. I think this is actually really good evidence of early veneration. And I think that's and there is a difference between veneration and worship. I mean, there's definitely a difference, but the idea that this mention of Saint Titus is probably the earliest evidence we have of saint veneration. But it's also early evidence, too, of the existence of the epistle of Titus.
That would be exciting.
That's very exciting right there. That Titus was a well enough known figure that he would have been known in Germany. So think about this. This German Roman would have had to know about this little letter that had been that had left the Mediterranean world and was at least in spirit with him in this Roman village. I think this is really interesting. Like I've said this before, like when you look at, say, the geography of the church fathers, they're sending these epistles and gospels and texts all around the Roman Empire.
I think most of us, when we think of the early church fathers, the Catholic Church has done a very good job of making us all get the gut impression they're all clustered in Rome at that time. Yes. You get the idea that all the early church fathers were writing from Rome.
Yeah.
When they were actually writing from the different sees.
Yeah.
There were 5 seas at the time.
Yeah.
And it was spread throughout the Roman Empire.
Oh, yeah.
And the Roman Empire had vast reach.
And the one thing that I think we need to understand when we talk about, say, the early church fathers here is that how early Christianity got the gospel out was through the Roman postal system. The Roman postal system was a miraculous thing.
Can we import it to Canada? Please.
It'd be better than what we have in Canada. So much better. But this is what you would do, is if you wanted to send somebody a letter or a document or a parcel, you would pay a Roman postie.
Mm-hmm.
And he would ride with this package or letter to any part of the Roman Empire, go to the village, and then find the person to deliver it to and hand it to him.
It was reliable.
It was reliable. It was reliable. And we can see here that, this Roman in his 30s or 40s who's he may have been in Rome to begin with, but, he ended up in Germany. He got around. So, and this amulet written in Latin, is also proof that these texts were being translated into Latin too. So not only do we have some evidence here of the reach of the epistle of Titus, but also even potentially early translations of these texts into Latin. This is before Jerome. Sometimes they'll call these the Old Latin texts, the ones that predated Jerome. But here's, again, more evidence of that early translation. And as I said, since before Jesus Christ, bend all knees, the heavenly ones, the earthly, and the subterranean, and every tongue confess to Jesus Christ. That's paraphrasing of the biblical texts.
Yes.
So yeah, this is a fascinating, very, very interesting discovery.
What's also important about it is how clear they got the scans.
Yeah.
They used
cathode ray tube tomography.
Yeah. And
yeah, this is what a tomographic scan should look like.
If it has writing on it.
If it has writing on it, yeah.
It's a great example that the technology can do this. So other examples, like you brought up,
the Mount Ebal curse amulet has no writing on it.
Yeah.
It has no writing, at least that we can decipher.
If there had been writing on it, it should look more like this.
It should definitely look more like this.
In which case, several other people have suggested it's not actually a curse tablet.
Yeah.
Somebody said it looks like a fishing weight.
Yeah, Richard Hess said it looks like a fishing weight. There's been other authors, too, that have said it looks like a fishing weight.
And there are numerous examples in various museums of fishing weights.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if anything, this shows how good tomography can be. And actually, I would kind of consider this to be a middle example. This is not the best example of a tomographic scan I've seen, but this should be sort of the low bar of what we should accept as a tomographic, inscription here. An inscription that we can read through tomography.
I mean, the technology is amazing.
The technology is amazing.
The scroll is still rolled up.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't unroll the scroll and scan it. They kept it basically in its rolled state because it's too brittle.
But these silver scrolls are just amazing that we have a technology that can read them without destroying them.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is what we should expect from a proper inscription on a metal scroll that's been processed through tomography. This is what we should expect. If you can't read any writing on it, or it's so fuzzy that you squint at it, you probably don't have an inscription.
Well, at least you should be very hesitant to say anything. You can say, this kind of letter here and this sort of letter here suggests that.
Yeah. I think this that the curse amulet, the Mount Ebal one, I think Scott Stripling, Peter Gert van der Veen are just exercising wishful thinking. There's no inscription there. And it's very, very clear there's no inscription there. This? Oh yeah. There's an inscription.
People can clearly make out what is there.
Yeah.
And we're very confident in what they have translated the writing to be.
The translation is reasonable. The translation is you can tell it from the inscription. The chain of evidence is solid.
As you've said, it's in situ.
It's in situ.
It was found around a man's neck.
Mm-hmm.
It was a protective amulet, sort of like what people do wearing St. Christopher medals today.
Yeah. To protect the living.
Yes.
Protect him while he was alive.
Yeah. It is interesting that the author of this article said, in an era without advanced medical knowledge, such items were vital sources of comfort and security for you and your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of hit the emotions because they didn't think it was a magic talisman.
Yeah.
Reciting this was not a spell.
Yeah.
It was a reminder of God's consistency, that God is a God who cares.
Yeah. The author also says here that this takes our understanding of Western Christianization and Christian monotheism to a new level. And the reason that he says that is because there's no reference in this amulet to other religions. It's pure Christian, a purely Christian amulet. There's no references to paganism. There's no references to Gnosticism.
Yes.
You find a lot of amulets out there that have this blend of Gnostic and Christian elements. But this text doesn't have that. So it does show that there was a Christianated form of Christianity and Christian monotheism in the 3rd century. It's really interesting.
Well, a final word was that both this one
Mm-hmm.
and the mosaic
Mm-hmm.
showed there was a very dynamic relationship between Christians and Romans.
Yeah.
During the years 200.
Yeah.
Before the official Christianization.
Yeah.
The Roman Empire.
Yeah. The other thing we should note too, and that's a really great point, is this was a Roman male.
Yes.
That's really an interesting thing right there too, is because a lot of Roman men were reticent to become Christian because it meant loss of livelihood. It could get you thrown out of the guilds. It disqualified you for certain Roman favors. So it had been often seen that Christianity was the religion of women and slaves.
Yes.
And this guy, as a Roman citizen, having a proper Roman burial, wouldn't have been a slave.
But he also believed in this strong enough
Mm-hmm.
that he took his faith to the grave with him.
Yeah.
That has been pointed out in all these various articles.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting find. Did you want to add anything else to this?
No, that was pretty much it.
It's widened our context. It's widened our context of what we now know about early Christianity.
The final part about taking it to his grave,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it was found in the context of a larger Roman cemetery,
Mm-hmm.
this man knew other people would know he was buried with that amulet.
Yeah.
Everybody who was around him at the time of this burial would know he was a Christian.
Yeah.
So, as you said, it is unusual, but maybe it wasn't as unusual as we thought.
Maybe. It could have been. It could have been a lot more common than we thought. We don't know how much, and this is sort of what's kind of interesting about this too, is that we kind of got testimony of early Christianity from the point of view of the apostles and the early followers of Christ. And then we get some more view, a little bit more insight from the church fathers. But it's really not until, say, Nicaea that people start coming out of the woodwork, declaring themselves as Christian. when the persecutions are over. Because that's what happens is you have these and persecutions between the earliest days of Christianity and Nicaea. So there's a lot of people who are really reticent to come out as Christian. So the fact that we have an open Christian here being buried with this amulet
Maybe in the farther reaches, it wasn't as intense.
And that's possible too. It's possible that, say, in the hinterlands, that the persecutions weren't as nearly as severe. It's completely possible.
It is possible in the hinterlands, people just thought, these people are good neighbors.
Yeah, that's possible.
We can all get along.
Yeah.
Don't look, don't tell.
Something like that. So I think we'll wrap it up here. So we hope you really enjoyed that discussion of this tiny silver phylactery amulet that was found in situ in a Roman grave in Germany. We hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.